Imagine hating the one person who brought you into this world. That's the reality for our man James. This is no ordinary tale of familial discord. It's a story of a man wrestling with an unsettling truth, a deep-seated hatred for his own mother. James, a seemingly ordinary man, goes about his daily business just like anyone else. He works a 9-to-5 job, pays his bills, enjoys a good book now and then. But beneath this facade of normalcy, he carries a heavy burden. A burden that clashes with the societal notion that a mother's love is sacrosanct, that to hate your mother is unthinkable. Yet James grapples with this harsh reality every day, a reality that leaves him feeling isolated and misunderstood. But why does James hold such disdain towards his mother? Let's delve into his past. James's childhood was far from idyllic. His mother, a woman of harsh demeanor, held the reins tight. She was a force to be reckoned with, wielding authority like a sharp-edged sword, cutting through the normalcy of childhood with her stringent rules and high expectations. Picture a young James, no more than 5, constantly under the shadow of his mother's stern gaze, jumping at every command, every admonishment. His world was not filled with the laughter and play of typical childhood, but rather the cold, hard echo of his mother's voice, reverberating in his ears, setting the rhythm of his existence. His mother's love was not expressed with warm hugs or gentle words of encouragement. Instead, it was a love that was wrapped tightly in demands and expectations, a love that felt more like a yoke than a comforting embrace. Her idea of nurturing was to instill discipline, often veering towards the unreasonable. Her affection, if one could call it that, was a complex maze of duties and obligations, a labyrinth that James was expected to navigate flawlessly. Emotional neglect was a frequent visitor in the household. James's achievements were met with a nod, his failures with a stern glance. His mother's heart seemed impervious to his pleas for kindness, her ears deaf to his cries for understanding. The absence of emotional support left James feeling isolated, even in the presence of his mother. The constant pressure, the relentless demands, the emotional vacuum, all these were the fertile grounds in which resentment took root. James's heart, once a blank canvas, began to be filled with deep shades of bitterness and anger. The child's heart, meant to be filled with joy and wonder, was instead becoming a garden of thorns, a battlefield scarred by the constant tug-of-war between a child's need for love and a mother's rigid discipline. As the years passed, the seeds of resentment planted in James's heart began to flourish. The moment that forever scarred James and turned his resentment into hatred happened when he was 16. James had always been a good student. He had a knack for numbers and a fascination with the world, making him a natural at mathematics and science. But it was his love for words that truly set him apart. He would spend hours tucked away in the library, lost in the world of books, dreaming of becoming a writer. One day, he penned a story, a deeply personal tale that was a reflection of his own life, his struggles, his dreams. It was his masterpiece, his heart poured out onto paper. He was proud of his creation and decided to share it with his mother, hoping for encouragement, maybe even a bit of praise. What he received instead was a public humiliation. His mother, in a fit of rage, tore the manuscript into pieces, threw it into the trash, and declared in front of their neighbors, "You, a writer? Don't make me laugh. You will never amount to anything." The words stung, cutting deeper than any physical wound ever could. In that moment, James felt a mixture of emotions: shock, disappointment, embarrassment, but most of all, a burning hatred for his mother. He had shared something deeply personal, only to have it thrown back in his face. His dreams were reduced to a laughing matter, his ambitions dismissed as foolish. But it wasn't just the humiliation or the harsh words that hurt. It was the realization that his mother didn't believe in him, that she didn't think he was capable of achieving his dreams. It was the understanding that his mother, the person who was supposed to support him, was instead his biggest critic. That incident left an indelible mark on James, transforming his resentment into a deep-seated hatred. It was a turning point, the moment when the seeds of resentment finally bloomed into a full-fledged hatred. This wasn't just about a torn manuscript or a public humiliation. This was about a betrayal, a deep wound inflicted by the person he least expected it from, his mother. Living with hatred isn't easy, especially when it's directed towards a parent. As we delve deeper into James's narrative, it becomes evident that his adult life is a battlefield. His hatred for his mother is the silent enemy that continues to wage war on his happiness. It's a struggle that doesn't just affect him, but also those who dare to get close to him. James is like a ship caught in a stormy sea. He's constantly tossed around by the waves of his emotions, unable to find solid ground. His relationships are the first casualties. They start off with a spark, full of promise, but soon, the shadow of his past looms over them. His hatred seeps into his interactions, turning sweet words bitter and warm gestures cold. His partners often find themselves walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around the issue that they can sense but never fully understand. James's resentment towards his mother becomes a wall that keeps him trapped within himself, unable to let anyone else in. Each failed relationship is a painful reminder of the emotional baggage he carries. The struggle extends to his mental health as well. It's like a dark cloud that follows him wherever he goes. Some days it's a light drizzle, a dull ache that he can ignore. But on other days, it's a storm, a torrent of anger and pain that leaves him feeling drenched and exhausted. He grapples with feelings of guilt and confusion. After all, society expects us to love and respect our parents unconditionally. But what happens when a parent becomes the source of your pain? How do you reconcile the expectation with the reality? It's a constant tug of war that leaves James feeling drained. James's story is a testament to the fact that unresolved childhood issues can have long-lasting effects on our adult lives. It's a struggle that many can relate to, a silent battle that often goes unnoticed. The question remains, will James ever find a resolution to his internal turmoil? Hatred, like any other emotion, doesn't last forever. But can James overcome his hatred for his mother? In the labyrinth of emotions, James found himself at a crossroads. He could continue down the path of resentment, a path that had become all too familiar, or he could choose a different direction. A path less traveled, perhaps, but one that promised the prospect of resolution and relief. James decided to seek therapy, a decision that wasn't easy for him to make. The idea of baring his soul to a stranger was daunting, but he knew it was a necessary step towards healing. Through therapy, he began to untangle the knots of his past, each session revealing a new layer of understanding. He learned that his hatred for his mother was not rooted in her actions alone, but in his perception of them. He had held her to an impossible standard, expecting her to be flawless when she was, in fact, human, with her own set of flaws and shortcomings. This realization didn't justify her actions, but it did provide him with a new perspective. James felt a strange sense of liberation. He was no longer bound by the chains of hatred. He was free to make his own choices, to define his own narrative. He decided to confront his mother, not out of anger, but out of a desire for closure. The confrontation was difficult, as confrontations often are. Words were exchanged, tears were shed, and old wounds were reopened. But amidst the chaos, there was also catharsis. James was finally able to voice his feelings, his resentment, his pain. And his mother, for the first time, truly listened. Their relationship didn't miraculously mend overnight. It's not how real life works after all. But the conversation marked the beginning of a long and arduous journey of healing and understanding. It was a step towards resolution, towards burying the hatchet that had driven a wedge between them for so long. James also found peace in understanding his mother's shortcomings. He realized that she was a product of her own experiences, her own struggles. He learned to separate the person from the actions, to see his mother not as a villain, but as a woman who had made mistakes, just like everyone else. In the end, James's journey wasn't just about overcoming his hatred for his mother. It was about finding himself, about understanding his emotions, his reactions, his fears. It was about learning to navigate the complex maze of his psyche, about finding the courage to confront his demons, and the strength to let go. Whether or not James reconciles with his mother, he learns a vital lesson. Hatred is a heavy burden to bear, and sometimes the only way to lighten the load is to let go.